Another Sales Wisdom Pod today with JR Butler. He is CEO and founder at Shift Group. We're going to talk athletes, we're going to talk veterans, we're going to talk sales, funds, and everything in between. JR, welcome to the pod. Can you briefly introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your businesses?
Absolutely. JR Butler, originally from Massachusetts. I spent 15 years in the technology sales industry as an individual contributor, VP of sales, and then a chief revenue officer. Prior to that, I grew up in a hockey household. My father is a 40-year high school and junior hockey coach in Massachusetts, Hall of Famer. And I kind of tripped and fell into sales. Had some success as a leader and individual contributor. And recently, about a year ago, started my own business where I help basically folks like myself, former elite athletes, as well as military veterans, successfully transition into lucrative sales careers in the technology, medical, real estate, and financial services space.
Love it. I guess the athletes and military, somewhat similar background because they do hard physical feats, both require lots of discipline. And I think they've got like very good skill set to be in top position, right? In leadership positions to teach others about their wisdom. Starting with your dad, tell us a bit more about your dad and tell us the influence that had on you.
Yeah, I think, most people would consider my upbringing very old school, I guess. And that's kind of, we were taught from a very early age that you don't get anything unless you work for it. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I got from my dad was a lot of the intangible characteristics and mindsets that have made me successful as an adult were taught to me from a very young age, right? Like don't be entitled, respect your elders and be coachable. Things like, just because you lose doesn't mean you quit. Like you kind of fight through adversity. You got to be a good teammate. Like all these little lessons and things that, veterans and athletes bring to the table from a hiring perspective were things that have been drilled into me from a very young age, having a father as a hockey coach. So, I think I owe a lot to the lessons and stuff that I learned from him growing up.
Then you played hockey yourself. What were your learnings in hockey, which is probably my top 5 favorite sport?
Well, I think hockey's a unique game, right? Because there's 5 people on the ice and truly everybody has to do their job. And it's such a team sport in terms of like the locker room culture and everything that comes with that. So, I think my biggest lesson from hockey was, if you're a good teammate, you're doing your part for the larger organization. And I've always taken that to heart, right? Like that's my biggest thing when I was a sales leader, when I was a salesperson is, understanding my strengths, understanding my weaknesses, and, not only just working on my weaknesses, but making sure that I'm leveraging my strengths to add value to the larger organization, to the larger team. And I think from a hockey perspective, that's been my biggest life lesson coming out of hockey was being a good teammate always.
Yeah, hockey can be painful sometimes with tackles. You can have your lungs on fire. It's like skating back and forth is really demanding. And teamwork, I guess, passing the goddamn puck. A lot of people don't know that, they're manger de puck, like we say in French. In Quebec, it's like our national sport. So lots of learning on my side there. My dad subscribed me to hockey, but a bit late. And it was kind of our sports there. So I was like less good than my friends, for example, that all did double digits in classification. But yeah, I had a lot of fun and learned a lot. A cool thing that a lot of cultures in the world don't know out there is that just like there's basketball court outside in the winters in some parts of the US and in all parts of Canada, you can just go outside and play against other players on public/outdoor ice skating rink. And that's a lot of fun. And then you did some coaching as well. What's your coaching style?
My coaching style is candor. And I think that's just kind of my general leadership style, right? Like, I've played for coaches and worked for bosses where I couldn't get a read. I didn't know where I stood. And I always struggled with that. So I think from my perspective, I try to be as transparent as possible with people that work for me, right? Like, what are they doing well? What are they not doing well? What do they need to do better? And how can they get better, right? And like, that's kind of, my perspective is candid leadership. And I also think like, leading to the individual. Everybody's different. Everybody's unique. I was the kind of kid and kind of player, and I'm the kind of employee that like sometimes you need to light a fire under my ass and yell at me. But not everybody's like that. You got to kind of read the situation, read the individual. So I try to lead with candor, but also lead with individual understanding of what matters to that person.
Right. Then the athletes and the military themselves that you help get into sales, how do they need to adapt, or is it like almost the perfect fit from day one?
No, I think there is some adaptation that needs to adaptation, I guess is the way to say it, that needs to happen. I think generally like when I think of successful people, there's like four things about them that's successful. It's their attributes, it's their mindset, it's their skills, and it's their knowledge. And I do believe that athletes and veterans bring the attributes and mindsets right off the top. Like, we have to teach them how to reapply those things and communicate those things and things like the interview process. But for the most part, those are set. Where they need the most help is on the skills and the knowledge, right? Whether they're selling medical devices to doctors or software to IT professionals, there's a gap there on the knowledge side that we try to fill. And then there's a gap on the skills stuff, right? Like a great Olympic athlete has all the intangibles, all the attributes, all the mindsets, but they need to learn how to cold call, right? If they're going to be a tech salesperson. So we teach them those skills. We teach them how to practice those skills. So the gap is really more on the skills and knowledge than the attributes and mindset, but there's still some rounding of the edges that we need to do on the attributes and mindsets.
Interesting. I guess some of them, are they like transitioning career? Like, do they still do the athlete type of stuff or military, or is it like a hard transition from 0 to 1?
No, I mean, actually, this summer, funny enough, we have a lot of professional athletes that are planning to play again next year that are doing, we got them internships, we got them part-time jobs. I'd say 95% are hard transitioners, right? They're either coming right out of sports or service, or they played sports, they served in the military, they did another job, like they were a teacher or a coach or a personal trainer, and they realized that they weren't getting the fulfillment that they were looking for or the financial gain that they were looking for. So they're either transitioning right out of the game or transitioning out of something else into sales.
Right. With military, do you get often PTSD and mental illnesses getting in the way? And how do you help solve that if that's the case?
No, I mean, I think like that's definitely, if anything, that's more of a misnomer on the company hiring side, right? Like, most hiring managers, when they think of military veterans, they do think of like PTSD, and certainly that's a huge challenge that veterans have. But the VA and the U.S. military specifically, which is what I know, they have some really good programs, and they do a lot for these veterans to help them kind of get through that adversity, because it is understandably very, very hard. But by the time we have a veteran coming to us, they've worked through that part of their lives. I think it's always part of their DNA. But I think if anything, that type of adversity only makes them a better candidate.
Do you see adversity and competition sometimes getting in the way of accomplishing goals, or is that mostly a pro when it comes to sales?
I think it's definitely a pro, right? Like that's kind of why I think sales is such a great career for veterans and for athletes, is because there's a scoreboard. You win or you lose. It's black and it's white. There's no ambiguity on success. So I absolutely, and if that isn't what you want, then you should stay the hell away from sales. So I find it to be a pro with our folks.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me about the business model. Like, how does it work? If I want to hire one of your folks to have in my sales org, like, how much do I pay you? Do you help in coaching? What's the deal here?
Yeah, so every veteran and athlete that works with us it's free for them. We put them through about a 30 to 40 hour training camp, boot camp, whatever you want to call it. But all of our athletes and veterans get extensive training. It's no cost to them. The way that our business model works is the companies that work with us, we have about over 150 total companies across North America that have signed paperwork with us. And the way it works currently is they sign an agreement with us. They're then allowed to review profiles of every candidate that we have in our program. And then they determine, using those profiles, they determine if they want to interview them. They can interview as many people as they want. They only pay us if they hire someone from us and that person makes it 90 days. And we charge a percentage of the first year base salary. So it's a contingent, we're really a contingent staffing and recruiting firm with an interesting twist in terms of who we focus on and what we do with those people while they're with us.
And how do you first outreach to these folks? Is it ads on LinkedIn? Because me, I use cold outreach, cold email outreach for a lot of things. Not all athletes or military personnel will be on LinkedIn as a database. So where do you find them?
Yeah, actually, we don't do any outbounding, cold outbounding to, we do that more to on the company side. We don't really do that on the athlete and veteran side. The way that we get most folks in our program is through partnerships with university athletic departments, professional players associations, agents. We also have a really good referral program. So if an athlete sends us their teammates, they make money when we get them a job. And then we have a big, social presence. So we get a lot of athletes come through and find us on Instagram and TikTok. And LinkedIn is growing, but that's definitely more of a company facing tool than a candidate facing tool.
Right. What have you learned from the athletes you've worked with so far?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is that we have to constantly be improving the way we're engaging with them. Like, one thing that I've learned recently in the last couple months has been like, we're trying to figure out a way where we can get these folks a little bit more self-awareness, because I think self-awareness is something that comes with time and experience. And when we have a retiring athlete or a transitioning military person, getting them some context as to who they are behaviorally, what type of things give them emotional energy, is super valuable. So that's something that we're solving for right now. That's been my biggest lesson recently.
What have you learned from elite military personnel like SEALs?
I think with SEALs specifically, and like, any special forces and any like elite military, they have a lot more similarities than you would think with professional athletes, in that team is like really important, right? Like, so when we look at companies that want to hire from us, we ask a lot about like, what's the team culture? Like, is this really a team, or is this just a bunch of individuals trying to get theirs? Folks that serve in those types of military situations, the team is number one. So they need to find a culture where that's the case, where team is first, company is first. And they care about making a lot of money. They care about growing in their individual careers, but the places that they're going to do that best are the ones that make team a huge part of their culture.
You are, well, you had a party life. I had that too. Starting from my 15s to my 18, I used to party thrice a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, almost to a blackout point, so like binge drink.
Yep.
I learned a lot of good and bad lesson from that, and this life culminated or ended after a Euro trip that I did, in which I drank for 2 weeks straight, and I came back from it in Canada. I had a 3 day long headache. And then I was like, okay, this is the last piece of that life that I lived. Caused a lot of destruction. I wear scars up to this day, mental ones too. What did you learn from this life of yours?
The biggest thing I learned, it's more about, for me, it was more about self-discovery. And I just realized that like how I do anything is how I do everything. So like, the reality is, whether it's good or bad, and in some cases it's bad, if I do something, I do it like 100%, right? So for me, that was really good as an athlete. It was really good as a student. It's really good as a business professional. It is not good when the habits are bad habits, because I will overdo bad habits. I haven't had a drink or done drugs in, it'll be 11 years in 2 months. But I know that like even little things like eating bad, if I eat bad 1 or 2 days in a row, like I'll go off the rails, and I'll put on like 10, 15 pounds in like a month. So what it taught me was like I need to be very, very careful about the habits that I choose and the activities that I do, because there's 100% chance that I'm gonna overdo them. So I just need to be careful about what I'm overdoing.
How do you manage your demons telling you, hey, go have this drink or go do this line?
Yeah,
How do you manage them?
I talk to people. I talk to a therapist. I journal as much as I can. I try to meditate. I work out. Those are the type of, those aren't pharmaceutical solutions, but I do think they are solutions. And I just need to, I got to kind of keep myself busy. And I've lost a lot of like really close friends, especially the last like 4 or 5 years, where the thought creeps into your head about you know slipping up and getting off the wagon, and you just got to. I always I don't think about the first drink. I think about the next day and how I'm going to feel when I don't want to look at my phone, or I owe someone an apology because I said something that I don't remember. So for me, it's like, keeping myself busy with good habits is number one. And then number two is when I do get weak, thinking about the consequences, not the experience. Because the consequences for me are dire. So that's like the biggest reminder I have to stay sober.
Yeah, right. Same here. The headaches of the next day,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the horrible feeling in bed of like, oh, I don't remember last night. What have I said? What,
Yes.
especially when you would go off the rails. And like you said, I think it's when you're low energy that you take these bad decisions. I think maintaining a high state of energy in your brain so that it's fueled to make good decisions is really crucial, because us humans we're very much imperfect creatures, right? We often go for the vice if we are offered it. It's like a low hanging fruit, if you want. And a life of discipline is way more scalable and way more enjoyable if you give it the time. You're a dad now. What do you want to teach your son or daughter? Did you tell me it was a son? I think you
It's a
did.
son. Yeah, it's a
Yes.
son. I think the biggest lesson I want to teach him is, to have to wake up every morning with a purpose, right? And the purpose changes over time, right? My purpose now is to provide the best life I can for him and my family. Um, Before that, my purpose, I wanted to make as much money as I could. It's kind of similar, but there's a different purpose behind it. My purpose before I had a kid was I like nice things. I like to travel. I like to live comfortably. So, I did what I could to earn as much money as I could. And before that, my purpose was hockey. And everything I did, everything when I woke up in the morning, I was doing stuff to maximize my opportunity in hockey. So like the times in my life where I went off the rails, or I was having trouble, if I look back at those times, it's because I was lost and I didn't have a purpose. So I think, having a purpose to me is the number one lesson that I'm gonna kind of hammer into my son's brain over time.
Last question. Why is pressure privilege?
Because if you're in a situation where people are counting on you, one, it just means that you've worked to a point where you're in a position of power, right? And there's a lot of people out there that are just going through the motions and surviving, right? But when you have pressure on you to perform and other people are counting on you, that's truly a privilege. It means that you're beyond what the average or mediocre person has gotten to. So, that's why we always say pressure is a privilege. It's a good thing.
Love it. Where can people find out more about you, JR?
Shiftgroup.io, www.shiftgroup.io, or they can find me on LinkedIn, JR Butler. I'm a good follow. I bring that candor to LinkedIn. Sometimes it gets me in trouble, but I am who I am, and I don't hide it publicly in comments on LinkedIn. So I'm a good follow if you like people getting chirped.
Yeah, I am the same. So I'll follow your stuff. You can follow mine.